Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Aaron Keller here with Paula Notari. Good to see you. We're going to be breaking down a couple of cases we're following here on the network today. We have three guests to help us break this case down as the jurors are about to head back into deliberations. Paula Notari is here with me in studio in New York, along with Byron Browne. He's in Phoenix, Arizona. Judge Ashley Willcott is in Atlanta. So let's start to break this case down if we can here. Judge Willcott, let me jump in and ask you this question. Look, that was what we were promised here. The defense's closing just said, okay, look, the husband may have been having some entanglements with the divorce with the victim, that other people had access to the victim's cell phone, raising a few questions in there. The question is it enough reasonable doubt to knock the charges out here?
Going to end up being the reasonable doubt that the jury at least is going to consider. And keep in mind, Aaron, in this case, she claims that she was with the defendant earlier in that afternoon, but yet, as you pointed out, her cell phone, although who it was with might be questionable, her cell phone was not in that area. Rather, it was in the area where the body was later found. So I think that in and of itself could equal reasonable doubt for a jury.
Wow, that's interesting because a lot of the guests here, Ashley, are saying, hey, look, this is circumstantial, but the state has so many bricks. One of the guests said yesterday that it's enough to build a skyscraper. Byron Browne, you're watching this trial with us from Phoenix, Arizona. I wanted to ask you about this. What do you think? I mean, the defense was basically all about reasonable doubt, things like that. It wasn't as detailed as some defenses we've seen. Did it necessarily need to be?
I don't think that there's enough there to create reasonable doubt at all. I think the prosecution has enough evidence, even though it be circumstantial evidence. I mean, the fact alone that she was found in a grave with soil and concrete and surveillance footage shows her buying soil and concrete. I mean, you don't have to see it raining outside to know that wet ground means it rains. And I think there's enough there for a jury to draw the reasonable inference and that MacArthur's guilty.
Paula Notari here in New York. What do you think? I mean, we're basically having the same argument that the jury's going to have in a matter of moments when they head back into that room and shut the door.
I'm usually the most optimistic, but I don't see any hope for this case. I think it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Witnesses lie, but they have the phone records, which counter her claims that they were in some other location. They have the body right there on the property. They have the Home Depot evidence the day after she goes missing, showing that she was purchasing potting soil and concrete. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that.
Exactly. I mean, and one of the big questions, we have to talk about this at some point when we move forward, but why did the defendant save the receipt? She paid cash. That's an interesting psychological question that I want to talk about with this panel. But first, the defendant spoke with the police not once, not twice, but 3 separate times before she was arrested. Keep in mind, she was a former CSI, and she spoke freely without saying she wanted to remain silent, without asking for an attorney. This is some of what she said. Okay, so that's what the defendant told police during one interview. But keep in mind, other friends got up on the witness stand and said that she also called the victim the B word, said the world would be a better place without the victim. When defendants say things like that, Paula Notari, jurors hold defendants responsible.
And again, I think witnesses can say this or that, and sometimes it's difficult in cases where we only have witnesses. We have seen cases like that. This is not one of those witness cases. Here we have phone records, videotape evidence, and it just makes sense. This whole story that the prosecution is putting forward, when we add in the motive, it all just makes perfect sense.
And when it makes sense, where there's a narrative, Byron Browne in Phoenix, that's when juries tend to convict. They have a clear sense of what's going on. They can turn around and say, we buy what the state is selling us. The story just makes logical sense. Is that what's going to happen here?
I think the jury is going to find that the story makes logical sense. I mean, it's the old adage, right? 1 + 1 = 2. Everything that you hear leads to MacArthur having an issue with Wright. The money, I mean, the money's the big thing, right? She couldn't repay the money. And then Wright kept tracking her down all the way to the body being buried on MacArthur's relative's property. All of that leads to only one conclusion in my mind, that she's guilty.
Okay, Judge Ashley Willcott, you were on the fence with this one here. Is the money enough of a motive in this case? I keep going back to that, but I think that I see motive beyond the money here, because we have the defendant saying that she didn't like the victim. She had all these negative things to say.
Yeah, I think there are different things coming into play in this particular case. But I do think the money in and of itself is enough of a motive because, right, it was $100,000, Aaron, right, that allegedly, well, he testified that she owed, there's back child support, and she took $100,000 without permission. That's a lot of money to a lot of people. So I think that that could cause desperation to be the right sufficient motive.
So you have that part of the motive. So if, I guess, theoretically, just for the sake of argument, if you're going to get into a money dispute with somebody and get mad at them, and it also happens to be someone that you loathe, which seems to have been the situation, despite the picture of the victim and the defendant there acting all chummy wherever they were when that image was taken. Byron Browne, I'm adding 2 and 2 together here, and I'm seeing more than money for a motive.
Yeah, there is more than money than a motive for sure. I think money is one of the biggest motives, but obviously MacArthur and Wright had personal issues. MacArthur didn't like Wright. And I think it's one of those things that things added up over time. There's likely other things that are going to come out about MacArthur. You heard in the opening statement from her lawyer that evidence is going to be heard that the jury might not necessarily agree with MacArthur's lifestyle. So I think that we're going to hear more evidence that comes in to prove that it was more than money. It was personal. And that's what I think we saw the end result.
I agree. I think this is a pretty strong case for the state, despite a couple of potential areas of reasonable doubt. That's just my opinion. The jury got the case just a few minutes ago at about 5 minutes after noon here East Coast time. They're an hour behind us there in southern Florida. So we're going to take a break here on the Law and Crime Network, and when we come back, we're going to continue to break this down. The jury is going to work through lunch. We are watching, we are waiting to see if a verdict is going to be coming in a matter of minutes or if it's going to be hours and hours. We'll be right back.